So welcome to all guests that have already tuned in. That's fantastic. What I can promise you, we have a fantastic panel of guests today, a great topic. And please, if you have any questions, leave them in the chat function here. And unless you want to share your question live later, please put your microphone on mute and switch off your camera. And then later we can either read out your questions, or we'd also, of course, love you to ask your question live. We really have prepared a great show for today. We have an inside dive into what is digital transformation from a leadership perspective. We got to know what are the Digital Transformation Awards. We have fantastic guests for the panel. But most importantly, we have about 20 minutes for your questions. So please start filing and fielding your questions so that we can make this as relevant as possible. So without further ado, let's get started today. It is exactly 5:02. So after German Swiss time, we're a little bit late, but we'll make up with that through German Swiss efficiency. Thanks for tuning in today on August 26th for the first episode of Digital Transformation Leaders. My name is Lars Födisch, and I'll be your host for today and for this series. We'll be here every 2 weeks with new exciting topics around and about digital transformations. Especially during this COVID era, digital transformation has taken the debate to the kind of extent of immediate actions. It's the next level. What wasn't urgent is now C-level topic in nearly every organization. And we are very happy that SwissCham, together with Deloitte, helped to set up to not only today's episode, but also the award series that we'll introduce very soon. And just to throw out a few numbers to get started, about 87% of companies think digital will disrupt their industry. About 90% think digital will disrupt their industry if it has not done so yet. So this webinar series is brought to you with really the ambition to have a conversation about what does digital transformation mean, and what does it mean for you, and how can we learn from each other. So this is a platform of learning and exchange of best practices. But we don't only want to hear the great stories, the glory stories, the win stories. We also want to hear about what didn't work out, because most of our learnings in life and in business come from when something didn't work out as planned. We have Deloitte as one of our main supporters and sponsors today, and we'll have Kirti Chivukula on behalf of Deloitte here with us. Other great guests, I'll introduce them more in detail later. As you can see from this slide, we have Alex Bono, the Chief Digital Officer from DKSH. We have Sergio Salvador from Egon Zehnder, who will share some of the insights right after I stop talking. And Andreas Enderlin, I would say not only the managing partner of Hugo Capital Partners, but also the mastermind behind this series and the DX Awards. So without further ado, I will launch a poll. So we want to see, where are we with DX 10 years in? Is it a 10-year-old story, or is it top of CEOs' minds? So if I can ask everybody to just quickly type in your answers. DX, 10-year-old story, or top of CEOs' minds? I have my opinion, our panelists have their opinion, and I'll just give you another few seconds to make your click. I'll make mine right now. DX, 10-year-old story, or top of CEOs' minds? Let's share the results in a minute, but first let's hand it over to Andreas, because he would like to share more about the Digital Transformation Awards. What are they all about? Over to you, Andreas.
Well, thank you very much, Lars, for that kind introduction, and obviously also for the flowers. You know, I'm not the mastermind of that, but I am the chair for the Digital Transformation Award. Behind that initiative is actually a strong team. We also have sponsors. We have the SwissCham board. We have supporters. We have governmental entities. And so at that stage, I would just like to extend a very warm thank you to everybody that contributed, that supported this award that we're going to talk about quickly now. And it's a great honor to be here today. So just a few words. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but obviously we wanted to take that opportunity to show to you what we have done and what this whole Digital Transformation Award is about. Clarissa, if you can go one further. Okay, I think, you know, to frame the discussion that we had at the beginning of this year, we really were thinking about priorities within the SwissCham board, and saw that, you know, obviously digital transformation is a big topic. And as we had the pandemic hitting us, obviously this came even more clear. And I think what we are seeing here is really everybody agrees that it's a big topic, and we will see later on whether, you know, it's a 10-year topic or a very recent one. But what is very clear is that 70% of the leaders say that we don't have the right skills, we don't have the right leaders and operating structures and strategies to really execute on that. So this was kind of the initial thought behind our award. So one further, Clarissa. Okay, so what is this about? You know, what did we want to achieve, and what is the objective? So as you can see on the left-hand side, it's really about bringing together the people that have been working on digital initiatives, on different projects within the last couple of months, but especially during, you know, the COVID situation. Everybody has been working very hard, and it's really about recognizing what they have done. So we want to create a platform for everybody to kind of showcase what they have done. We will have 7 subcategories. As you can see here, this is just going from advanced manufacturing to financial services and so on. And what we thought as being part of that award, and that is so critical to us in terms of learning about digital transformation, is really to offer this best practice exchange platform that we now have with our first webinar here. So we're very glad to kickstart that. And as Lars was saying, we will have that on a bi-weekly basis, and that should really bring together you know, leaders that can share ideas and learn from each other. It's also about connecting the ecosystem. And if you can see on the right-hand side what broad support we have, we are really honored to have everybody on board here, from the chamber side, Eurocham, for the French chamber, from the German chamber, you know, our sponsors, but then also governmental entities that are so critical here in Singapore to really support that award. And it's really about bringing together all these different people to exchange on digital transformation. Then we got a lot of questions about who is eligible. It's really everybody. This is not a Swiss award. I want to reconfirm that. It's really about all the companies. So if you are registered in Singapore, you can apply for this award, and I warmly you know, motivate you to do so. Then obviously the questions come up about, okay, how are you going to assess, you know, what are the criteria? So this is why we have been working with Deloitte, with Curti and the team to really develop a framework that has 5 kind of categories. We will have a look at these a bit later on, but we would like to kind of have an objective framework to drive that assessment. Then the winner scoring, we will have a jury, we will have also the public. So the public opinion is important to us, and we will then also make sure that you know, the winners have a platform to showcase what they have done. So further on, maybe Clarissa. Okay, so how is this going to work? It's basically an approach that you can see here. By the end of September 30th, we'll have all the applications in. So if you haven't done so, please apply. Then we will have the shortlist, judgment by the jury. So we will have, qualified and very experienced people in the jury to make that assessment. Then we will go over to a subcategory winner event, so online pitching event where the selected few companies can pitch to the jury and the public. And then finally in November, the overall winner announcement also with the pitching event. Okay, next slide, Clarissa. Okay, to round this up, what are the benefits? If you're a company sitting in front of the webinar now, what is really in for you? So I think what is really critical is the recognition of your own people, to make sure you have a platform that is helping these people to get recognition. That's, I think, very important. Then it's all about brand awareness. It's making sure your company is recognized as a digital leader. It's about best practice exchange, as we have been mentioning before. It's about connecting the ecosystem, so you will gain new contacts, you will access new networks through this platform. I think that's very valuable. Winners will have attractive prices, and I think what is even more important, the last point, is really with our digital certificate, we'll make sure that it's objective and that it's kind of clear who has won that award. And I think in the end, this will be critical for the overall award. And as you can see here, all our supporters, again, a big thank you to everybody. And if you have any questions, Clarissa and Andrea are here to answer these, or you can also get in contact with me. We're very happy to answer all the questions. So maybe one further, Clarissa. So, and now everybody obviously is asking, what is digital transformation? What are you talking about during that whole session? And I think, there are like 5 categories that we look at when we look at digital transformation. And obviously it's touching on strategy, customers, technology, operation, but especially on organizational culture. And as you will find out today, leadership is a critical ingredient of a successful digital transformation. So this is why we selected also this as a first topic to kind of start with. And we're very happy today to have these experts joining our panel, but especially also Sergio Salvador, who is an ex-Google person that has spent a lot of time out in the field and knows what digital transformation is about. And he's now with Egon Zehnder and really a recognized expert in terms of digital leadership. And with this, I would like to hand over to Sergio, if you like to give us a bit of a flavor around digital transformation.
Thank you very much, Andreas, and thank you very much, Lars, as well. I really appreciate it. And keeping with maybe a little bit of the light format of this seminar, just after that introduction by Lars, I don't know how I can follow up on that, but I know for the next football match I watch on TV, I want him as my commentator. That was incredible. So let's talk a little bit about transformation. If we can go to the next slide, please. My aim with this presentation is just to discuss and to put out a few items, a few ideas, and hopefully use those as a guide, right, for our later Q&A. Now, if we look at how the world is changing and the concept of leadership, one of the things about leadership is that it has changed. The underlying principles of leadership, of the underlying theory, has changed very little in centuries, right? In around 600 BC, the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu wrote, "A leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves." A little bit more recently, a leadership guru who died a few years ago, Warren Bennis, declared, "Leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality." However, the modern age, the last 10, 20 years or so, have been a game changer for businesses and their leaders, and this is actually having a profound effect on the concept of leadership. There are many forces, including the emergence of data and knowledge, currency that have changed everything. Entirely new business models are emerging, and organizations are becoming a lot less hierarchical and far more flexible, right, in terms of how they operate. All of this, or a lot of this, is driven by things like globalization, but increasingly technology as well. Can we go to the next slide, please? Clarissa? Okay, I think we're in the next slide. This is a very, very short comments about this. But if you look at the evolution of, stores or businesses like IKEA, Walmart, and Taobao, I think the graph speaks for itself. Right? Unfortunately, it's not been updated for a couple of years, but you can see exactly what happened and how fast, right, was the evolution of those businesses compared with a much older one like IKEA. A lot of this is driven by technology, right? Taobao is essentially 100% technology driven outside of the logistics needed to get things from one place to another. We can go to the next slide, please, Clarissa. And these changes, right, are of course causing leaders to ask different questions than before. Perhaps traditional leaders would ask themselves, how can I align my team behind my long-term vision? How can I create a brand, kind of a strategy that attract the next generation of employees? What we are seeing today is that leaders are asking increasingly, how can I find other leaders with the potential to evolve with unforeseen changes? How can I build a culture of innovation and agility that taps into the team's best thinking? How can I empower my employees? How can I drive the right behaviors, right, that are going to help us succeed in the digital era? Let's go to the next slide, please. And there's a couple of authors, right, and advisors that we work with at Egon Zehnder, and I really love these quotes by them. On the left, Erica Fox, the author of Winning from Within, and she also has a practice at Harvard, recently said, as the world reinvents itself, the only way is to reinvent yourself too. So by definition, if the world is becoming increasingly digital, right, what does that mean for a leader, for people like yourselves, for people like us? And also Frederic Laloux, who is an advisor, coach, and facilitator, also said, the most powerful thing we can do is not predict and control, by sense and respond. The traditional leaders, right, would be expected to basically know everything about the business, to always have answers for everything. The leaders of today, increasingly, we are seeing that what we need from them, right, is the ability to use significant amounts of instinct based on experience to reach different decisions, perhaps, that they would have reached before, just because the world has become so volatile, so unpredictable. We can go to the next slide, please. So, as another great coach said, Marshall Goldsmith, right? The traditional management methods simply don't work anymore. What got you here won't get you there is the title of a famous book by Marshall Goldsmith. But even someone like Simon Sinek, right, for those of you who have read his books and watch his TED Talks, for example, try to convey this message, right? That, yeah, it was great, but even on an individual level, but also at the business level, what was done before will not necessarily work in the future. If we go to the next slide, and I'm going to wrap up in about 1 minute or even less. We recently asked 50 CHROs around the world what they thought were the traits to be successful in the digital era. So these 50 CHROs gave us these answers. Now, there is a little bit of a sorting, right, of ranking, if you will, based on the responses. In reality, all of these are critical in various ways, and perhaps we can address some of those during our discussion later. As we can see, for these CHROs, the ability to cope with ambiguity and cope under pressure are absolutely critical. But even things like critical thinking and courage, right, or perhaps risk-taking, are going to be absolutely important for the type of leaders that they want to bring to their organizations, the type of leaders they want to groom in their organizations. This is, again, these are some of our findings. The work that we do with our clients means that we can get access to this information. I would very much like to hear from the other panelists, and of course, hopefully we can have some great Q&As and some thoughts to share as well, because like in everything else in life, there is no right or wrong, right? Everyone may have a different perspective, and I would love to have the opportunity to discuss that. So we can go to the thank you slide, and I will pass it on back, I guess, to Lars, if I'm not too mistaken.
Fantastic. Thank you, Salvador, for your great insights and too many quotes to remember. They're all really great. Thank you very much. So then let's to kick off our panel. Just a reminder for everybody who has tuned in today, please, if you have any questions that you want to ask our experts, please put them down in the chat function of this webinar panel. Yeah, the chat function, just put down your questions and we'll try to answer as many as possible. And thanks for those that, who already shared their questions prior to the start today. Okay, so let's kick things off. Clarissa, can we have a look at the poll results? So maybe that's a good idea. Is it a 10-year-old kind of story, or is it top of everybody's mind? So interesting mix here. Yeah, somewhere there, always been around. The majority, it's top of CEOs' minds, but yeah, it's not a new story. Thank you very much. I think that's interesting to see. So let's start with Curti from Deloitte. Deloitte is a 175-year-old company that was forced to reinvent itself through those 17.5 decades. So if you look at Deloitte as itself, as a case, how do you see the importance of leadership to get through that transformation in the digital context?
Yeah, thanks, Lars, and thanks, Sergio. I particularly love the quote about sort of leaders kind of being in the background and then sort of the team realizing they did it themselves. Yeah, I mean, you know, Deloitte, I think a lot of people may know we're a 175-year-old company, started out, you know, more in the audit space. But the part of the business that I work in, which is Deloitte Digital, you know, is now one of the fastest growing parts of the company, right? And so over the course, I think we also had some good fortune of looking at our clients and looking at seeing what are those key trends that we see coming out. And when we talk about leadership, there's really three different types of transformation that we see that leaders having to charter today, whether we call it digital transformation or just plain transformation, right? And it's really around thinking differently, acting differently, and reacting differently. And of all sort of the companies that we deal with, including ourselves, right, there's really three types of leaders that we see. There's digital investors who tend to believe more in that venture capital mindset, right, where it's really about uncovering opportunities, investing in talent, forging partnerships, building ecosystem. I guess in a way that's kind of what we do as well. But you know, you can think of the likes of Unilever with L3 here in Singapore, P&G, tapping into the ecosystem to drive sort of that mindset from a VC perspective. The other one is digital pioneer. So these are folks, you know, I think Jack Ma comes to mind as someone, and I saw in the chat, we were talking about sort of Alibaba as well. But the idea is that digital pioneers are customer obsessed and they are dissatisfied with the status quo. And they're looking at the power of idea and bringing that power of idea from the customer lens, right? And think of all the things that Alibaba has done in terms of building that online marketplace, and that's sort of what the pioneers are. And the third one is digital transformers. And these are folks where we are fundamentally talking about connecting the edge to the core. You know, something that comes to mind here sort of with Microsoft, right? If you look at what Satya Nadella did in terms of taking a company that was really focused on desktop software and turning it into sort of a cloud-powered company. So those three archetypes are sort of what we are seeing evolving from a digital transformation, from a digital leadership perspective, And I'd love to chat, on the panel with some of the other folks around, what are they seeing, right, in terms of leadership.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing, Kurti. Over to you, Alex. So I call it your life from the war zone, right? You're in the middle of it. So how to create digital leadership in your organization. Your company is in supply chain and market expansion. So, can you give us an update live from the war zone?
Correct. Thank you, Lars. I think it's very different, and we are a very traditional company. We are moving things, right? We are moving goods. So it's all about efficiency. So suddenly you come and then you say, we want to innovate. We want to be digital. And the question is like, what does it mean for us, right? And this is always the $1 million question that the company understands how to transform depending on what they are, in which industry they are, right? So it means like you need to understand, first of all, for me, it's a story of change, and you need to understand the current leaders, how they think, right, and what they think. Because in this type of company, you really need to understand that this is traditional, right? It means like if you come with a busy model, first day, it won't work. Right? If you come with a model like, I would say, like Jack Ma wants, it won't work, right? So you need to tailor the model and understand what the leaders are thinking. And you basically need to be an actor of change for the thinking of those current leaders. So I would say like you're a catalyst for the leadership to change instead of being yourself like the one that is leading the change. Because in traditional companies, that it won't happen. You cannot be the one, I would say, the black sheep and trying to change with your leadership style. So you need to, your job is to change those leaders, change the board. So this is the main job, I would say, in these traditional companies. And DKSH is one example. Obviously, we focus on certain specific areas and so on. But one of the big areas that I'm working is to basically make, or as I said, change the way we think, right? Change the way we think is my main mandate across DKSH and what I'm trying to achieve. And that's the leadership change that I'm looking for in general.
Excellent, thanks. And then I think we should add one characteristic that people in your position need to add: a lot of patience.
Yeah, true. That's a true education. Being sure that the people understand why they need to change. People does not change, and basically 80% of digital transformation is about changing behaviors. They name it culture, but I think the culture is the result of those behaviors. And you only change behaviors if there is a real need or you are obligated about it.
Thanks, Alex. Over to you, Andrea. So you were in a DX environment over the last 3.5 years in a B2B context, right? So how was it for you? Because you were in a leadership position, the whole organization tries to change, and what we heard from Alex just now, it's you can't do it alone. So from a leadership perspective, what worked, what didn't work? What's your experience?
Well, I think I would just agree with Alex. In the end, if we talk about digital transformation and leadership, essentially it's really about leadership in essence, right? So it's a lot about making sure you create buy-in internally, that you kind of explain why you're doing things differently, why you are maybe digitalizing a product, why you suddenly want to go through an online channel. And I was also in the last years in a very traditional environment where it was really about making sure that everybody is sitting in the boat. I think what is really critical is top management buy-in. If it's not lived from the top management, it's going to be very difficult to drive it through the organization. And I think if you look at why initiatives fail, it's often the case that maybe on the board, on the executive board, there is not an alignment on a digital agenda, for instance. And then, you know, if you look at the direct reports, how they're going to execute that strategy, if this alignment is not happening at the top, it's going to be very difficult to drive it throughout the organization. So I think this is one thing. The second learning that I made is really about resources. So you might have, you know, enough resources for a pilot, but then the big question is about scaling. So you might have a pilot maybe in your home country. This is what usually happens, you know, in big organizations. You start in your home country, you have a lot of resources, and then the question is, how do you bring it out into the regions? And then resources suddenly are not allocated anymore. And then, you know, typically these initiatives dies off. And that's, I think, one of the bigger issues that you need to tackle if you want to drive a digital transformation throughout your organization.
Sight out of mind kind of problem, yeah?
Yeah, and maybe thirdly, you know, yes, absolutely. And thirdly, maybe, you know, the complexities. I think big organizations are obviously very complex. And when you drive change, and that doesn't, you know, it doesn't differ if you do a digital change or if you do a normal change initiative, right? It's really about connecting the dots and making sure you understand all the complexities within the organization. You know, you have legacy systems, you have data that is all over the place, is decentralized. And so if you don't understand that, it's going to be very difficult to kind of execute on a change initiative.
Thank you, Andreas. Sergio, a question I want to throw at you, because, you know, while the other three gentlemen are kind of in the middle of it, you have kind of an external view on it as a leadership expert. So what I hear is there's sometimes kind of a cultural issue, right? So the board is very old school, might be, you know, that old kind of predict and control mentality. And then they throw in that new dynamic kind of leader who trusts his gut and instincts and is ready to, you know, change the whole organization, and that doesn't necessarily fit. Any kind of experiences you can share, or more importantly, tips on how that guy who is kind of half set up to fail actually can make it a success story?
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, ultimately, Lars, I think, and some of my thoughts will probably echo with what my colleagues and my fellow panelists are saying, right? That sometimes I equate digital transformation in companies as an exercise of convincing everyone who is inside of a car that it's actually a good idea to change the wheels of the car while driving it, right? There is a very fine balance, right? And there's two speeds that, in my opinion, are important to keep in mind when driving a digital transformation exercise. One of them is about technology and tools. The other one is about people's philosophies, mindsets, and behaviors, right? Which one do you think is the one that is hardest to change, right? A good, very determined CTO, CIO, CEO can potentially change the whole technology in an organization over months or a year, for example, right? But according to some very well oft-quoted reports out there, a full digital transformation of a whole organization can take 4 to 5 years, a successful one. So there is a misalignment there. The technology can be put out there fairly quickly, fairly straightforwardly, right? But if we don't focus on changing people, it's going to fail. Right, a very determined CEO, right, in the relationship with the board. To start with, I wonder why would a board put in place a CEO that is going to move at a much faster speed that they are able to stand from the board perspective. Right? I may not disagree with you that could be an exercise to setting up that people to fail, right? And I think it makes a lot of sense to have lots of discussions between that board, that CEO, that leadership team, so that they can figure out together, right, what is the actual speed at which everyone believes the organization can accept change. Right? So if that has already happened, I think maybe the board needs to reconsider, right, what they want to achieve and how fast, right, and whether they are themselves ready to make the change. Last year we published a CDO report, kind of assessing chief digital officers around the world, and what came out of it, some very fascinating data. But something that came out of it is that traditionally CDOs were hired, and there was a certain expectation that a CDO could change the organization. that is also another way to set up someone to fail, right? But recently, there's been a much clearer understanding that one single person cannot change the organization. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes the whole organization to change, right? And to become more digitally transformative, if you will.
Thank you. So then over to you, Kurti, right? So are you building that village in an organization that's very decentralized, very successful over its period? But how do you build that village of change in an organization like Deloitte? What are some of your recipes for success in digital transformation?
I mean, I think some of the points that the other panelists made are spot on, right? I think the biggest thing that certainly that we see is people treat sort of this digital transformation as something different. And I saw that in the chat as well. I mean, it's just the natural course of evolution, right? Where, you know, every few years, something new comes up where we have to evolve. And the other theme that I heard from my fellow panelists is this concept of failure. And failure isn't bad. Right. And if you look at sort of our journey as Deloitte, you know, not every acquisition that we've made was successful. Not every pivot that we tried to make as an offering was successful. But, you know, the North Star is still the North Star. And I think it's about learning from those failures, what didn't work, and how do we take that into the next set of initiatives, and really having that open mindset. So I guess start small. Don't set expectations of you know, knocking it out of the park, if you will, on your first attempt, and know that it's a journey. As Sergio said, it, you know, 4 to 5 years, boy, I wish it was that quick in some organizations, right? I think we've seen, you know, some places where it takes much, much longer than that.
Good. Thanks, Kurti. Alex, what are some of the scars in that journey that you can share that made you stronger as a digital transformation warrior? What are some of those, you know, war stories that you can share that really said, okay, we tried that, now it seems so obvious, but we figure it out one battle at a time?
Look, I mean, it's not very long in the case stage, but I can tell you previous situations with telco company digital transformation, but also in the case stage. I think the general will highlight the typical thing is like, you speak one thing, you do another thing, or your behavior is like, let's be a digital company, let's be analytics, let's be data centric. Now I say, let's do it. And they say, oh, but no budget for this, or we don't change the organization, or let's hold it there until next year, or let's not reorganize. It could be any excuse, right? So in one side, you say, I want to be fit, I want to be handsome, but I don't want to go to the gym. I wait until tomorrow, right? Tomorrow is better. Now I have a dinner. So this is the thing. At the same time that we want to change, and I think this is human behavior, and that's why your level of leadership needs to be very good on having critical conversations with the CEO, in my case, so with the board, and saying, look, you are saying one thing, we are doing another thing, right? So you need to walk the talk and do what we intend to say. So I think that probably is the number one that I will put on top. As Sergio say, changing the IT, well, is plain vanilla compared to all this. Reorganize business units could be another important thing. You create a new digital organization that's trying to change. This is the second one that I think is very important. So you are trying to change the organization, and then you want to do something more innovative, but you want to at the same time not be in a trap by the corporate mambo jumbo, I call it. At the same time, you don't want to create another silo, right? So reaching the good balance for me in between innovative, which may be a digital accelerator, and at the same time be able, like a good octopus, to embed all that and reach the tentacles everywhere. That I think is the second challenge that is one of the difficult ones, because it means you need to change the organization. And the organization, hello, what you are saying, the car is working. So be careful, don't touch too much, because it can derail, right? So they are always afraid of that. We're making money, don't touch it, right? So those two challenges, I would say, are the number one. The third, if you want, again, I repeat myself, it's about keep saying, every organization says the same. we are not anymore in the industry of XYZ. I remember the telco times, they say, we are not a telco anymore. I said, well, we are. We are a fintech mixed with this. We are a data company. I said, we are not, right? So again, it goes the same. Talk, what you talk and what you do is not the same. You behave as a telco still. You sell like a telco. Or in the KSH, at least we don't say we want to be a digital company. We are quite realistic, and this is one of the good things of the KSH. It has grounded feet in the reality. So different perspective. The KSH is a very interesting case because it needs to go digital faster given the COVID situation and so on. And I find it extremely interesting. So I would say those three, it will be my highlights on scars that you need to fight internally. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. Andreas, maybe last question from me before we go to the questions from the audience. We heard a lot about you have to take risks and you have to innovate yourself, right? So maybe you can share from your experience in your digital transformation leadership story. Can you share a context on when you had to innovate yourself, challenge yourself, and take a big risk and leap of faith in balancing that we have to change, but don't endanger the cow that gives the milk?
Well, very difficult question, Lars, as the last one, I have to say, because, I was in a P&L responsibility. So I was, when Alex talks about, the constraints, I was exactly a part of these constraints. So I had to deliver, on a daily basis, the figures. And obviously you need to look at the short term and at the same time also look at the midterm and long term. So I think, in the end, it's really about making sure you take calculated risks in such an environment. We don't want to do silly things, right? So you have a CapEx budget, you have an OpEx budget that you are maneuvering in. So you are moving the needle by small steps, right? So let's take an e-commerce kind of strategy. You're not gonna throw over your channel strategy within 2 weeks. So you have to be very careful with your current distributors, for instance. How well are they organized in terms of digital capabilities? It's all the devil lies in the details, right? So you are moving really small stones, and this is what I was always telling my people. It's not about the big leap forward. It's about the small steps that we need to take as an organization. So quite frankly, to answer your question, I have never taken a very big leap forward to put myself at risk, because again, I was a manager in a P&L structure. But I think it leads to the same question that we have been discussing, the risk awareness and making sure we can instill some of this risk mentality into bigger organizations. I think this is very, very critical to innovate, and not only for the big leaps forward, but it's also for the incremental innovations and how you execute on them.
I know it was a difficult question because, and it's interesting that we have those two different kind of points of view, right? I thought what we heard so far is interesting. Technology per se is not the problem anymore. It's the people. And then balancing how fast you change versus not risking your P&L. Because at the end of the day, you'll be measured into where does the P&L KPI stand, not how fast did you execute the DT. Or DX, right? Good.
Actually, Lars, sorry, one thing, people are not the problem either. People are part of the solution. The important thing is how to convince them that makes sense for them.
Yeah,
absolutely, right? And I think what I touched on at the beginning is COVID seems to be an absolute accelerator. A lot of change initiatives are extremely accelerated the moment people feel the urgency or the fire behind, right? So I think a lot of initiatives suddenly get accelerated. But let's go into what our audience has. We have some fantastic questions and comments here both, right? Tim Bieringer said, what's the bigger risk? Not to change or try new things and experiment. It might be less risky to leap forward. It's a balance thing that we just discussed, right? Andreas, let's look into some of the questions that we have here. Let me just go through the long list. Mindset and skill set change is required, but it's required at different levels. We have the board, we have the leadership, we have the IT team. Maybe who's the volunteer who wants to ask into how to best initiate that mindset shift? Really, if we look at the organization, how do we bring forward that idea of it's not an IT project, it's a business project to bring you to the next level? How do you bring that into the minds and hearts of people? Kurti, I'll call you out.
Yeah, I mean, I think I go back to, you know, if you look at this as a big standalone hairy beast that you have to tame, I think there's sort of that, the initial inertia of getting going always comes in the way, right? You know, every time, you know, we see sort of our clients that get started, it's always looking at a defined, tangible problem that we can solve. That, yes, let's look at the North Star, let's look at where we're going. But let's start small, right? And I would say even within Deloitte, you know, we never started to say, look, you know, Deloitte Digital is going to cover all of these things and all of these capability areas. I think we said, look, you know, our pedigree in advisory needs to carry through to the new, and we got started sort of in smaller areas in a very focused way, and eventually kind of scaled out. And I think that's important, right? So it's not you know, there isn't a magic. I guess there isn't sort of a silver bullet that's going to solve this. You know, it is a journey that we need to go through.
Then maybe Alex, how do you get people convinced that it's not them supporting IT projects but helping themselves?
Look, I think in my personal situation, what I did is a lot of road showing, right, internally. I call it brainwashing. Being the most annoying guy, being really doing a lot of internal marketing, explaining what is digital transformation, telling and explaining that what are the benefits of looking at all these initiatives or products or projects. Even I had the word project, to look at in the long run as a business, right? And I'm gonna put it very simple example, right? When you want to digitize a channel, right? And you say, now we launch the mobile app. Okay, sure. Everyone says it's just a channel, right? It's an app. And they said, no, it's a business. Yeah, now you need to monetize it. And they were like, wait, hold. This is IT thing. They said, no, now it's yours. Now it's on the business. So you need to make money out of this channel. And they're like, but we have our sales guys. They do the job. Oh, we need to do change management, right? So they start thinking how impacts. So in the moment impacts them, they start thinking not anymore an IT project, right? It's really a business project. So I think it has different tracks, right? First of all, in the moment they see it's close to them and it's going to impact, obviously put more interest. Second, it's about a lot of road showing internally in the company. And then obviously, having the leaders of every unit, business and department aligning with you, or at least supporting the big ideas of transforming. Definitely, COVID, it has been a bless for everyone being less convinced, right? Less need of convincing. So they are more convinced. So that has been really positive. If the only positive of the COVID, I would say that's a good one.
Very careful when people on a webinar say COVID has been a blessing. So thanks for putting that in context. Let's go. Thank you, Alex. Let's go to the next question. We have Suraj Shetty here. You want to ask your question? If you want to quickly turn on your microphone and video, you can ask your question about critical success factors and digital maturity.
Sure, just pardon my appearance, but thank you so much for making this time to speak with us. So quickly coming to the question, we talk about digital transformation, we talk about the critical success factors. and the other element about the digital maturity of the organization, right? And obviously, when we navigate through the digital transformation initiative, there is a critical intersection of the key success factors that are essential and the maturity or the immaturity of the organization. How do we circumvent this or navigate the disconnect and ensure that the digital transformation initiative is a success? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Suraj. Who want to take that on? Do we have a volunteer?
Maybe I can just share from my perspective. You know, in the end, it's the essence again in leadership. It's nothing new, fancy. It's about managing, you know, your current business, and at the same time managing this tension into changing your business. This has been a leadership task for the last 50, 70, 80 years, right? So this is nothing new. So this is an essential leadership question that every leader needs to ask. And how do you bridge that? You know, it's really about having seen both ends of you know, the traditional business and how you run your traditional business and how you change it and what is needed to change that. So I think it's a lot about bringing in diverse experiences in terms of leaders that have gone through different phases and different changes from different industries, maybe also, and to bring in this fresh blood to kind of understand the change that needs to happen from, you know, the current business into the new kind of business.
Thank you. Next question, I'm calling out Charmaine. Charmaine Misquitter. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. Charmaine, you want to ask your question about how long should these initiatives take, and how long do companies actually have?
Yeah, actually, I think Kirti mentioned that companies do take about 3 to 4 years. Now, this was pre-COVID, I believe. So yes, that's right. Companies did take a very long time to adapt to anything digital. But would you say now, given the situation with COVID, a lot of them are all scrambling around trying to find any strategy, finding people who actually can help them transform their business. Sometimes it can be dangerous, I believe, because they're just joining the bandwagon. They don't know what it is, but, you know, does it help them or it doesn't help them? But what would the recommendation be for companies like that?
Any particular panelist you want to put on the spot, or should I choose?
Choose.
Okay, Alex, I think that's you can take it on.
I think you just nailed the change, right? The pre-COVID and post-COVID. I think what the people is focusing in the post-COVID, basically, or in the post-COVID, we're in the middle. It's just like about customer journey. You realize is those companies that they have been affected because the business, what they are doing, digitizing the channels, trying to reach customers, partners, and everyone in a digital way. So I would say it's about digitizing channels and customer journeys, client journeys, partners, all the relationships of your ecosystem. So that's the number one. And this is where they are focusing, right? Obviously, if you are focusing on something different, and if you have been affected, then you are doing wrong, right? Obviously, remote working, it will be the second one. But those two, I think the ones that they are going to maybe save your ass if you do it. And you have the example with e-commerce, with many companies trying to go online, delivery quickly. But look, it could be event company, right? That now they do it digital. So basically, I see that these two are the core activities that will focus, obviously encompass with a little bit of improving your technology platform and so on. But again, that's doable, right?
But would you say that the timeline is definitely more quicker now than compared to?
Absolutely. It depends in my opinion, it depends on how you are impacted, right? If you are heavily impacted, then you are super fast. This is death of life, right? Of the company. So people is doing it in an agile way, I will say. Certainly without much planning, they start, they do it every day, they overview plan every week, and it's just about the results. It's not actually many companies are learning agile now by doing, right? That they need to deliver. I have a few examples on the food industry about that. It was accelerated, right? Before they were thinking about 1 year, 2 years, little by little investment, and suddenly, magically, they did it in 1.5 months and with very little budget, interestingly. So it's about when you're underwater, you have no choice but to survive. So it accelerates massively, yeah, but only in certain aspects, and it depends on your stage of impact, right? So for instance, I can give you an example. DKSH is a company hasn't been impacted massively by, so therefore accelerated, but didn't create the urgency sense.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your question, Charmaine. Thanks, Alex, for answering. One last question from the audience. Do we have Lukman Nur Hakim here? You asked something about can we do 50% of DX in a company? I thought that was an interesting approach. Lukman, can you ask your question? Are you there? Otherwise, I'll read it out. Oh, please,
yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the time. Actually, I'm from Pekanbaru, Indonesia. I was a sales leader in chemical company last time. But how to implement this digital transformation for the chemical company? What I mean, like a chemical supplier or automation supplier, because the supplier have to promote the product directly into the mill. So how is it possible to do the 50% of digital transformation for, like, we can do the meeting in Zoom, blah blah blah, but to test the product we have to come to the mill, right? So anybody can explain to me that what's kind of the way that we can solve this problem?
Okay, I think from, if I might take the liberty to, thank you, Lukman, for the question, to paraphrase a little bit, right? So a lot of companies are not digital in nature. So how much of the company can you actually digitalize? If you, for example, do components for food. Anybody want to take a stab at this one?
I can take this one because that's exactly that, right? It has performance materials, and we do. And I must say, the level of digital transformation in that industry is not high. What it improved a lot is, I would say, the customer relationship on the first stages, like acquisition, contract management, all these things. But there are things that they need to be physical, right? So what you can do is more sample sending, more digital platform. But the overall, I would say the chemical industry is not experiencing a massive revolutionary digital transformation. It's a steady path, and the lead times are also very long in general for creating products. So it just didn't have that need, right? That need, yeah.
Maybe I want to add something that, in my opinion, right, having a meeting on Zoom is not digital transformation. It's having a meeting, right? The platform is a lot less relevant, right? It doesn't change any real behaviors. It doesn't change any ways of working. And therefore, that should never be considered as digital transformation as such, right? And from the perspective of, if I might add a little bit to this question as well, what we observe, the talent space with leadership teams, is that each company is a very unique case, and the approach has to be customized for each company, right? But what I see some companies do, they don't necessarily try to digitize or transform half of the business. They might just create a spin-off or external company, right, where they do their experimentation and they figure out how to bring it back into the main business, or maybe that company becomes their main business 10 years down the line, right? So that's another way of perhaps looking at solving this challenge. Thanks, Lars.
Excellent. Thanks for the question, Lukman, and thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for answering. So we are already 58 minutes in. The time just was flying by. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and let me try the impossible task on summarizing what we discussed a little bit. We had fantastic insights and quotes. I like when Sergio said, and calling me out on it, right? People are part of the solution until you convince them they have a role to play. We had Alex telling us that in the context of digital transformation, only in this context, COVID was a blessing because it creates that sense of urgency. And another pearl of wisdom he shared was, it's important to have the lead of every department aligning with you to drive digital transformation and just repeat the message, and do roadshows. It's really a lot of groundwork, right? We had Andreas from a P&L leadership perspective who shared, make sure you take calculated risks, move in small steps. I think we all aligned in saying it's not an IT problem, it's managing what you have to do now and where you want to bring the company in the future. And one of the sound bites from Curti was, mindset shift is needed for navigating through today's challenges and bringing traditional businesses to the new age. So thank you very much for our panelists. Thanks to our sponsors and supporters, especially Deloitte and SwissCham. But the biggest shout out is thank you for everybody who tuned into and comments we had from the audience. So thanks Alex, thanks Andreas, thanks Sergio, thanks Curti, Lukman, Jermaine, and the others who actually were called out to ask their questions live. That was the first episode of our DX Leaders series. Next episode is on Tuesday, September the 8th. That's in 2 weeks. And we have Savik Banerjee here. He's the CTO of Tata Digital and Group Advisory on Technology. And he will talk about the future of Internet. Please tune in again on Tuesday, September 8th, the future of Internet. Fantastic topic, even more fantastic guests that we have for episode 2. Otherwise, please check out the SwissCham website for the series and the upcoming events. And of course, please apply for the awards. Be in it to win it. Thank you very much. Signing out, and bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.